This Day in Sports History.
Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
And welcome back to another edition of This Day in Sports History. And whether this podcast is the biscotti accompaniment to your morning coffee, the bag of Funyuns with your lunch, your talkative companion on your daily walk, or that ice cube in your nightcap, thanks for making it part of your day. And if you choose to binge listen, well, we ask that you podcast responsibly. This podcast is a member of the Sports History Network, your resource for sports history. You can find more at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's August 28th, and on this day in the 1960 Olympics in Rome, a ruling was made that has some relevance to what happened just a few weeks ago at the Olympics. Controversy swirled at this year's Paris Olympics when an appeal in the women's artistic floor exercise stripped American Jordan Childs of her bronze medal and awarded it to Romania's Ana Barbosu. On this day in 1960, a protest by the American swimming team was denied despite solid technological evidence that the Americans were indeed correct. The event was the 100-meter men's swimming final in the 1960 Rome Olympics that had been held on the 27th. In that race, American Lance Larson surged in the final 25 meters and looked as if he touched the wall just ahead of Australian John Devitt. At this point, humans were the first judges and automatic timers were the backup. So, there were 3 judges tasked with determining who finished first. 3 more judges tasked with determining who finished second. Of the 3 first-place judges, 2 ruled the Australian touched first. Of the 3 second-place judges, once again, 2 ruled the Australian touched second. Therefore, it was a tie among the 6 judges. The 2 electronic automatic timers, however, showed that the American Larson touched first, a tenth of a second quicker. After a long discussion, the Australian Devitt was awarded gold, with the chief judge tasked with collecting the first and second place scorecards casting the tie-breaking vote, despite never seeing the end of the race or watching any film replay. The American contingent appealed, and on this day their petition was denied, despite the electronic evidence. U.S. Olympic Committee member Max Ritter called the ruling and denial of the U.S. appeal trickery. The chief judge was not supposed to have the final say. Instead, the backup timers were supposed to be the backup determination of a winner in case of a close finish, which should have given the win to the American Larson. A little more of an insult is that Larson's official time for the event was changed from 55.1 seconds to 55.2 to match Devitt's time. If there was one good thing to come out of this controversy, though, it was that the Olympic Committee committed to using electronic timing in swimming beginning at the next Olympics in 1964. Another decision made on this day in 1955 would impact the game of football in the future, and it happened during a preseason football game. This preseason game featured the Los Angeles Rams and the New York Giants. The game was played in Portland, Oregon, and prior to this game, promoter Harry Glickman from Oregon Sports Attractions petitioned the NFL that if the game was tied after regulation, that the game would continue until there was a winner. The NFL gave the go-ahead for the proposal, and Glickman must have been some sort of modern-day Nostradamus because after 60 minutes, the game was tied at 17. And so they played on with the first team to score deemed the winner. The Rams' Norm Van Brocklin engineered a 70-yard drive in overtime, with Paul the Tank Younger bulldozing his way in from the 2-yard line to win it for L.A. Now, the effect wasn't immediate. It took another 19 years before the NFL would actually incorporate the sudden death overtime rule into games beginning in 1974. One other change incorporated in this game, and it would have been interesting if this had ever taken hold, but Glickman also numbered the field differently, and depending on which side of the field you were on determined how you saw it. The field was numbered goal line to 50 as is normal, but then continued on 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 to the opposite goal line. As Glickman pointed out in a letter to the league office, it was done to provide convenience to the fans and press to help in calculating distance on long plays, kickoff returns, and punts. On this day in 1988, Tommy Lasorda attacked the Philadelphia Phanatic. So back on the 23rd, I talked about Lasorda's role in getting Montreal's mascot Youppi tossed from a game in 1989. Well, here we are a year before, and, Lasorda had a thing about mascots. Even before this confrontation with the Phanatic, he had a run-in with the San Diego Chicken. In that episode, the Chicken stomped a Dodger hat accidentally 28 times during a bit on the field. Well, Lasorda confronted the man inside the Chicken suit, Ted Giannolis, after the game outside the Dodger locker room, and not so playfully told him that if he ever saw the Chicken stomp another Dodger hat, then the feathers were surely going to fly. Well, on this night in '88, Tommy's beef with lovable mascots was on full display. At this point, the Phanatic had a four-wheeler and he rode it on the field between innings. This particular time, he was holding a stuffed dummy that was supposed to represent Lasorda. It was just a lot of padding in an LA uniform with extra padding around the midsection to poke fun at Lasorda's belly. The Phanatic parked his four-wheeler near the Dodger dugout, and he hopped off, carrying the Lasorda likeness. Tommy was really not happy about the bit, and he walked out of the dugout toward the Phanatic, who backed away from him. Lasorda then grabbed the handlebars of the four-wheeler and started pushing it toward the dugout. Well, staying in character, but if the Phanatic could have mustered a worried look of, "Where are you going with my bike?" he probably would have. And he started walking toward Lasorda as if to ask that question. And then Lasorda started chasing the Phanatic. He tackled him, ripped the stuffed dummy away from him, and then beat him with it before taking the confiscated effigy and walking back to the dugout. The Phanatic recovered, hopped on his four-wheeler, stared down the Dodger bench, and that's when Lasorda threw a baseball at him. He dodged it, but he rode away nonetheless, so the game could resume. Of the 3 run-ins with mascots Lasorda had, a poll taken by TrueBlueLA.com, Dodger fans ranked his run-in with the Phanatic on this day as the best, with 78% of the vote. And one other thing, Lasorda must have a little bit of a Midas touch, because those 3, and only those 3, the Chicken, Youppi, and the Phanatic, are represented in the Baseball Hall of Fame. In another baseball rage incident, Detroit Tiger pitcher Denny McLain was suspended on this day in 1970 by his own ball club. The Tigers didn't play on the 27th, but sports writers had space to fill or a column to write, and so were milling around the Tigers' locker room. McLain was known to pull a prank or two, but he was also known to be mean-spirited about it and take things a little too far. He set up an ice-cold bucket of water, and it was dumped on Detroit News sports writer Watson Spolstra. How the gag was supposed to work, or whether Spolstra was the intended target or just a random victim, I'm not sure, but he took the brunt of it, with Detroit Free Press writer Jim Hawkins also part of the collateral damage. Tiger general manager Jim Campbell issued the suspension to McLain, which was the second time he was suspended during this season. McLain tried to explain that it was just a joke, and he apologized to the 2 writers who had gotten soaked, but McLain was not happy with his GM, complaining that he never stood behind his players. Things would not get much better for McLain, though. A few weeks later, he would be suspended for the remainder of the year by Commissioner Bowie Kuhn for taking a gun into a Chicago restaurant and waving it around. And on this day in 1954, 24-year-old Arnold Palmer won the U.S. Amateur, changing golf for the better. Palmer had played in the U.S. Amateur 4 previous times, coming up a little bit short in each one of them. In this edition, Palmer had to fend off a murderer's row just to get to the finals, including a 39-hole semifinal match against 38-year-old Ed Meister. Here in the 36-hole match play final, he was up against 43-year-old Robert Sweeney, a millionaire investment banker who had homes in Palm Beach, New York, and London. Sweeney was well known for playing with Ben Hogan in the weeks prior to the Masters and giving Hogan a stroke aside. Palmer got down early and trailed by 2 holes after the morning 18. He stayed patient and clawed his way back to tie Sweeney. Palmer didn't take his first lead of the match until the 32nd hole of the day, and then went 2 up with 3 to play. Sweeney won the 35th hole to bring his deficit down to 1, but Arnie rolled a 40-foot putt to a couple of inches for a short tap-in par on the 36th and final hole of the day. Sweeney conceded the putt and the match to Palmer. Palmer called this his turning point, giving him the confidence that he needed to turn professional. The next week, he was given the week off to go play in an invitational tournament in Pennsylvania. His boss at the paint store said he only let him go because he had won the amateur. And I only mention that because that next week, he met Winnie, the love of his life, and the woman he would spend the next 45 years together with. Time now for today's non-sports fun fact. Lady Gaga is so afraid of a particular ghost she calls Ryan that she spent $50,000 on an electromagnetic field meter designed to detect poltergeist. That's all I've got for you today. I'll have more tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.